You need a rest, Eric. Your nerves are showing.
Lily.
They called her the most beautiful woman in the world, but Hedy Lamarr died alone and nearly blind. Her fortune was gone, her face ruined by plastic surgery, and her own son was fighting for scraps of her will. But that's not the craziest part. Hidden in her tiny Florida home was proof of an invention worth billions. One that powers the phone in your pocket right now. This is the wild story of how a Hollywood goddess lost everything. Except her biggest secret. Hedy Lamarr was born on November 9, 1914, in Vienna, Austria. Her father, Emil Kiesler, was a banker who later became the director of one of Austria's largest financial institutions. Her mother, Gertrude, came from an upper-class Hungarian Jewish family and was a talented pianist. Even though Gertrude had Jewish roots, she converted to Christianity and raised Hedy in a Christian household. Hedy was never baptized, but this mix of identities shaped how she saw herself, especially later in Hollywood. Vienna at the time was a city filled with art, music, and scientific breakthroughs. It was a place where some of the world's greatest minds gathered, and Hedy grew up in the middle of it. While her mother encouraged her love for the arts, it was her father who sparked her curiosity about technology. He often took her on long walks, explaining how machines worked, streetcars, printing presses, and even the inner mechanics of simple household devices became fascinating lessons. She listened, asked questions, and imagined how things could be improved. She didn't know it then, but these childhood moments would lead to something much bigger later in her life. Hedy's beauty stood out from an early age. In 1926, when she was just 12, she entered a beauty contest in Vienna and won. This wasn't just a childhood achievement. It was the first sign of where her life was headed. The attention she received showed her the power of appearance, but she knew looks alone weren't enough. She spent hours watching people, copying their mannerisms, and studying their expressions. She later described herself as a living copybook, always observing and learning. By 16, she was determined to get into the film industry. But getting a job at Austria's largest film studio, Sasha Film, wasn't easy. She wasn't willing to wait for permission, so she forged her mother's signature to secure a position as a script girl. It was a small job, but it gave her a front-row seat to the filmmaking process. She watched directors, studied scripts, and learned how movies came to life. She was just a teenager, but she was already setting the stage for what was coming next. While working there, she got a small role as an extra in the romantic comedy Money on the Street in 1930. The next year, she had a minor speaking part in Storm in a Water Glass, another comedy. Around that time, producer Max Reinhardt noticed her talent and cast her in a stage play called The Weaker Sex at the theater in der Josefstadt. He was so impressed that he took her with him to Berlin, where bigger opportunities seemed to be waiting. But once she got there, things didn't go as planned. She never trained with Reinhardt or performed in any of his productions. Instead, she met Russian theater producer Alexis Granowski. He was just starting his film career and cast her in The Trunks of Mr. O.F. in 1931, a film that also featured Walter Abel and Peter Lorre. Not long after, Granowski left for Paris. She stayed in Berlin and soon got a lead role in No Money Needed, a comedy directed by Carl Bose in 1932. That film gave her more screen time, but it was her next role that changed everything. At 18 years old, Hedy Lamarr found herself at the center of a scandal that would follow her for the rest of her life. In 1933, she starred in the Czech film Ecstasy, directed by Gustav Machati. The film made history as the first non-pornographic movie to show nudity and a simulated female orgasm. though only through Lamarr's facial expressions. It told the story of a young woman trapped in an unhappy marriage who seeks love elsewhere. Scenes of Lamarr swimming nude and running through a meadow were shocking for the time and sparked outrage across the world. The film's release caused an international uproar. The U.S. Customs Service banned it, calling it obscene and immoral. Pope Pius XI condemned it. Several countries refused to screen it. Even when an edited version arrived in America in 1935, some states like New York and Nebraska still blocked it. While the controversy made Lamarr famous, it also led to her being typecast as a seductive femme fatale when she later arrived in Hollywood. The film didn't just change her career. It also changed her personal life in ways she never expected. One of the men who saw Ecstasy became obsessed with her, Austrian arms dealer Friedrich Mandl. At 33, he was one of the richest men in Austria, supplying weapons to governments across Europe. He was determined to erase Lamarr's involvement in the film and reportedly spent $280,000, over $6 million today, trying to buy and destroy every existing copy. He didn't succeed, but that didn't stop him from trying to control her in other ways. Lamarr married Mandl on August 10, 1933, when she was still 18. At first, she was drawn to his power and wealth, but soon she realized she had made a terrible mistake. Mandl was not just controlling, he treated her like property. He kept her locked away in their lavish estate, Schloss Schwarzenau, refusing to let her continue acting. Even her wedding ceremony had been on his terms. He forced her to convert to Catholicism despite her Jewish heritage. Mandl's obsession with power went beyond his marriage. He had close ties to fascist leaders, including Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. Lamarr's Jewish parents were horrified by his connections, but she had little say in her own life anymore. She later described feeling like a doll in a cage, displayed but never free. Yet, even in isolation, she was learning. Mandl often hosted military officials and weapons experts at their home, and Lamarr, despite being ignored in conversations, paid close attention. She listened as they discussed advanced technology and war strategy. She had no formal training, but she had a sharp mind, and this was her education in engineering, knowledge that would later change the world. By 1937, she knew she had to escape. The details of her plan vary depending on the source, but every version shows her determination. In her autobiography, she claimed she drugged her maid with sleeping pills, disguised herself in the maid's uniform, and slipped out of the house through a servant's entrance. She stole keys from Mandl's staff, drove to the train station, and fled to Paris. Another version suggests she tricked Mandl into letting her wear her most valuable jewelry to a party. She then used the opportunity to run, boarding a train to Paris with enough wealth to start over. Either way, her escape was dangerous. Mandl was powerful, and if he had caught her, she might never have been seen again. But she made it out. From Paris, she traveled to London. Hedy Lamarr arrived in London in 1937 with a clear goal. Louis B. Mayer, the head of MGM Studios, was in Europe looking for new talent, and she knew this was her chance. But when Mayer offered her a contract for $125 per week, she was insulted. Just a few years earlier, she had been the talk of Europe after her role in Ecstasy, 1933. A Czech film that had shocked audiences with its nude scenes. The scandal had made her famous, but it also made Mayer cautious. He saw potential in her, but he wasn't willing to take a big risk. Lamarr refused the offer, but she wasn't going to let the opportunity slip away. Instead, she came up with a bold plan. She booked herself on the same ocean liner Mayer was taking back to the United States. During the voyage on the Normandy, she made sure to stay in his orbit. With her beauty and charm, she captivated not just Mayer, but everyone around her. By the time they reached New York, she had turned the situation in her favor. Mayer agreed to a new contract, $500 per week, 4 times his original offer. Mayer had one more condition. If she was going to be a Hollywood star, she needed to leave her past behind. He suggested a new name, Hedy Lamarr. It was a way to distance her from the controversy of Ecstasy and create a fresh image. The surname was inspired by Barbara Lamarr, a silent film actress known for her tragic beauty. With a new name and a new contract, Lamarr was ready to take on Hollywood. Her debut came in Algiers, 1938, an American remake of the French film Pépé le Moko. She played Gabi, a mysterious woman who catches the eye of Charles Boyer's character. MGM built up her arrival with a clever marketing strategy, presenting her as an unknown Austrian actress with an air of mystery. When audiences saw her on screen for the first time, many reportedly gasped. Critics focused more on her looks than her acting. One review summed it up by saying, "One doesn't really notice if she can act. She's that beautiful." The film was a success, and Lamarr became an overnight star. In Boomtown, 1940, she starred alongside Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, and Claudette Colbert in a story about friendship, rivalry, and ambition in the oil industry. Directed by Jack Conway, the film was inspired by James Edward Grant's story, A Lady Comes to Burke Burnett. Lamarr played Karen Van Meer, a sophisticated socialite who gets caught in the lives of 2 oil wildcatters. Behind the scenes, tension between Gable and Tracy was high. Tracy wasn't happy with being second-billed, and their previous clashes resurfaced. But none of that affected the film's success. It made $5 million at the box office, a huge number at the time. While most of the attention went to Gable and Tracy, Lamarr brought elegance and intelligence to the film. Her character added depth to the story, standing out even among such a star-studded cast. A year later, she switched from drama to romantic comedy in Come Live With Me, 1941, starring opposite Jimmy Stewart. Directed by Clarence Brown, the film told the story of Bill Smith, a Viennese refugee played by Lamarr, who needs to marry an American citizen to avoid deportation during World War II. She finds an unlikely partner in Stewart's character, a struggling writer named Johnny Jones. What starts as a marriage of convenience slowly turns into something real. The film was a chance for Lamarr to show her comedic side, something she rarely got to do. Her chemistry with Stewart made the story feel natural, and critics praised how she balanced humor with vulnerability. The movie wasn't a major box office hit, but it proved she could handle more than just serious roles. That same year, she starred in Ziegfeld Girl, 1941, a glamorous musical drama that paired her with Judy Garland and Lana Turner. MGM had originally planned to cast Joan Crawford and other top stars, but by then, Lamarr, Garland, and Turner were rising fast. The film followed the lives of 3 women who become Ziegfeld Follies showgirls, each facing different struggles with fame and ambition. Lamarr played Sandra Coulter, a European immigrant who joins the Follies to support her husband, a violinist. Her performance was subtle and graceful, standing in contrast to Turner's more dramatic role as Sheila Regan, a woman caught up in the highs and lows of stardom. Ziegfeld Girl was another box office success, proving Lamarr's ability to shine in different kinds of films. But it also highlighted a growing pattern in her career. Hollywood often cast her for her beauty, rather than giving her roles that truly challenged her as an actress. By 1949, she reached the peak of her career with Samson and Delilah, a biblical epic directed by Cecil B. DeMille. She played Delilah, the woman who seduces Samson and betrays him by revealing the secret of his strength: his uncut hair. The film, based on the Book of Judges, took additional inspiration from Vladimir Jabotinsky's novel Samson the Nazarite. DeMille considered several actresses for the role, but was convinced Lamarr was the perfect choice after seeing her in The Strange Woman, 1946. He later described her as a gazelle, incapable of a clumsy or wrong move. Samson and Delilah was a massive success. It was released in December 1949 and grossed $9 million in its initial run, making it the highest-grossing film of 1950. It also won Academy Awards for Best Art Direction and Best Costume Design. Lamarr's performance was widely praised. She brought intelligence and depth to a role that could have been one-dimensional. Even DeMille himself said her portrayal went beyond just looking beautiful on screen. The film cemented her as one of Hollywood's leading stars, but it also marked the beginning of her gradual retreat from the industry, because her beauty became both a blessing and a curse. Hollywood now saw her as the ultimate exotic seductress. In films like Lady of the Tropics, 1939, and White Cargo, 1942, she was cast as a mysterious woman from a faraway land, desired but untouchable. Even when she starred alongside Spencer Tracy and Clark Gable in Boomtown, 1940, her role was secondary. Lamarr felt trapped. She once said, "Any girl can be glamorous. All you have to do is stand still and look stupid." It was a sharp comment on how Hollywood treated her. Determined to take control, she started her own production company in 1946, an almost unheard-of move for an actress at the time. But breaking free from Hollywood's expectations wasn't easy. While she found some success, the industry still saw her the same way. But Hedy Lamarr was more than just a Hollywood star. Behind the glamour, she had a brilliant mind that helped shape the future of technology. During World War II, she worked with composer George Antheil to create a system that could prevent enemy forces from jamming radio signals. Their invention, developed in 1941 and patented in 1942, was called frequency hopping spread spectrum. Though the U.S. Navy ignored it at the time, the technology later became the foundation for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. Lamarr's understanding of military technology came from her marriage to Friedrich Mandl, an Austrian arms manufacturer. He was one of the richest men in Austria and had close ties to European dictators like Mussolini and Hitler. Through him, Lamarr was exposed to advanced weapons systems and secret discussions about military strategies. But her marriage was controlling, and she eventually escaped to London before making her way to Hollywood, where she became a major star. Even with a successful acting career, she wanted to contribute to the war effort. She met George Antheil, a composer known for his experimental music, and the two of them started discussing ways to help Allied forces. Antheil had experience with synchronized player pianos, which used rolls of punched paper to control multiple instruments at once. Lamarr realized that a similar system could be used to create a secure radio signal for guiding torpedoes. Instead of using a single frequency, which could be easily jammed, the signal would rapidly switch between multiple frequencies in a coordinated pattern. This would make it nearly impossible for enemy forces to interfere. They designed a system that used 88 different frequencies, inspired by the 88 keys on a piano. The transmitter and receiver would hop between these frequencies in perfect sync, making the signal nearly impossible to block. They called it a secret communication system and received U.S. patent number 2,292,387 on August 11, 1942. But despite the potential, the U.S. Navy dismissed it, believing it was too complex to implement. Instead of using their design, the military relied on other methods to guide torpedoes, and Lamarr's invention was set aside. It wasn't until the 1960s, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, that the military began using frequency-hopping technology for secure communications. By then, Lamarr's patent had expired, and she never earned any money from it. But her work didn't go unnoticed forever. Decades later, engineers and scientists recognized the importance of frequency-hopping spread spectrum, which became a key part of modern wireless communication. In 1997, Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil received the Electronic Frontier Foundation Pioneer Award for their contributions to technology. In 2014, Lamarr was posthumously inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Today, her invention is used in everyday technologies that connect the world. She was more than just a movie star. She was a visionary who helped shape the future. Hedy Lamarr's love life was as eventful as her Hollywood career. She married 6 times, and each relationship had its own twists, from deep romance to bitter betrayal. Some unions were glamorous, others were turbulent, and a few left lasting scars. We have already talked about her first husband. Her second husband, Gene Markey, was a Hollywood producer and screenwriter. They married in 1939, right as her star was rising. Markey was well-connected and charming, and for a brief time, they seemed like a perfect Hollywood couple. They lived in a grand estate called Hedgerow Farm in Beverly Hills, surrounded by luxury. During their marriage, they adopted a baby boy named James, or at least, that was what the world believed. Decades later, James discovered he was actually Lamarr's biological son, fathered by her future third husband, John Loder. The truth had been hidden for years, turning what seemed like a simple adoption into a far more complicated story. By 1941, Lamarr and Markey's relationship had fallen apart. Her career demanded too much, and Markey had ambitions of his own. Their divorce was finalized after just 2 years. John Loder, an English actor, became her third husband in 1943. Their marriage lasted 4 years and brought 2 children into the world, Denise in 1945 and Anthony in 1947. Loder also legally adopted James, giving him his last name. On the surface, their family seemed complete. But later in life, James distanced himself from Lamarr and even contested her will after her death. While she was enjoying some of her biggest Hollywood successes during this marriage, her personal life was a different story. Conflicting priorities and the pressures of fame put a strain on their relationship. By 1947, the marriage ended in divorce. By 1951, Lamarr was ready to try again. This time she married Ted Stauffer, a former band leader and nightclub owner known as Mr. Acapulco. Their romance was fast and intense. She visited his nightclub, sparks flew, and soon after, they married at the Santa Monica home of a judge. But behind the excitement, trouble was brewing. Lamarr later testified in court that Stauffer was violent. In one incident, he hit her so hard at the Beverly Hills Hotel that she was knocked against a wall. He had a reputation for charm, but behind closed doors, he was a different man. The marriage fell apart quickly, ending in divorce in 1952, after less than a year. Her fifth husband, W. Howard Lee, was different from the others. A Texas oil tycoon, he was wealthy and powerful, offering Lamarr something she had never truly had: financial stability. They married in 1953, and for a while, it seemed like she had finally found a steady relationship. But money didn't fix everything. Their marriage lasted longer than any of her previous ones, stretching to 7 years, but it ended in a bitter legal battle. The divorce was finalized in 1960, and shortly after, Lee married another Hollywood actress, Gene Tierney. The drawn-out court battle over alimony was another painful reminder that her love life never stayed simple. By 1963, Lamarr's personal life had become quieter, but she still believed in marriage. This time, she chose someone unexpected, her own divorce lawyer, Louis J. Boys. They married that same year, but the relationship didn't last. They divorced in 1965, just 2 years later. This would be her final marriage. After this, she never walked down the aisle again. The last 35 years of her life were spent unmarried, living mostly in solitude. The 2017 documentary Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story, brought new attention to a woman who was far more than just a Hollywood star. Directed by Alexandra Dean and premiering at the Tribeca Film Festival, the film explored how Lamarr, once called the most beautiful woman in the world, was also a brilliant inventor. While audiences admired her on-screen performances, few knew she had helped lay the groundwork for modern wireless technology. One of the most striking elements of Bombshell is the use of never-before-heard recordings of Lamarr herself. Audiences hear her describe her ideas and frustrations in her own words. She speaks about how her intelligence was often dismissed, how Hollywood valued her looks over her mind, and how the world was slow to acknowledge her as an innovator. The film paints a vivid picture of a woman who was ahead of her time. Critics praised its storytelling and depth, earning it a 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and multiple festival awards. Even though Lamarr passed away in 2000, her influence continues. In 2022, the University of Malaga in Spain established the Hedy Lamarr Chair for Women in Technology, with support from Ericsson. The program promotes women in STEM through mentorship, workshops, and competitions like the Hilda Ericsson competition. Hedy Lamarr spent the last decades of her life in complete seclusion. Once one of Hollywood's most dazzling stars, she chose to withdraw from the public eye, living alone in a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in Castleberry, Florida. She rarely stepped outside. Multiple plastic surgeries had altered her face so much that she no longer recognized herself. By the time she was in her 70s, she had also become legally blind. The world outside her home faded, and she relied entirely on her telephone to stay in touch with people. Even with her children, she preferred long phone conversations over in-person visits. Despite her efforts to stay hidden, she still made headlines for the wrong reasons. In 1966, she was arrested for shoplifting in Los Angeles. The charges were eventually dropped, but the incident damaged her reputation. Then, in 1991, she was caught again, this time stealing $21.48 worth of eye drops and laxatives from a store in Florida. She denied any wrongdoing, saying she had simply forgotten to pay. Still, the damage was done. These incidents only made her retreat further from public life. By the 1980s, the glamour and fame of her Hollywood years were just a distant memory. She had once been one of the highest-paid actresses of her time. She had also co-invented a groundbreaking technology during World War II, a frequency-hopping system designed to prevent enemy ships from jamming torpedo signals. Decades later, her invention became the foundation for modern wireless communication, including Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. But while the world moved forward using her ideas, she lived quietly in Florida, far from the recognition and fortune she deserved. On January 19, 2000, Hedy Lamarr died at the age of 85. The official cause of death was heart disease, including arteriosclerosis and chronic valvular heart failure. She passed away alone in her home in Castleberry. Strangely, the day she died was also her daughter Denise's 55th birthday. Since she had been living alone for so many years, her death was considered an unattended case, requiring an investigation. But there was nothing suspicious about it. At the time of her passing, Lamarr's estate was valued at approximately $3.3 million. It was a fraction of what she had once been worth. During her peak in Hollywood, she had earned the equivalent of $300 million in today's money. But a series of failed marriages, poor financial choices, and legal battles drained much of that wealth. One of her biggest financial disasters came from producing Loves of Three Queens in 1954. She funded the film herself, hoping it would be a great success. But when she failed to secure distribution, it became a financial disaster, costing her a fortune. In the 1990s, as companies began profiting from digital versions of her co-invented frequency hopping technology, she tried to fight back. She pursued legal action against those using her intellectual property without permission. While she never received the fortune she was owed, these lawsuits helped her rebuild some of her lost wealth. Her will specified that the majority of her wealth would go to her two biological children, Anthony Loder and Denise Loder DeLuca. Each inherited over $1 million, along with personal belongings and memorabilia from her life as an actress and inventor. Unlike their estranged half-brother, James Loder, they had remained close to their mother. After her passing, they took an active role in preserving her legacy, even helping create the 2004 documentary Calling Hedy Lamarr. James Loder, on the other hand, was left with nothing. Hedy had adopted him during her second marriage to screenwriter Gene Markey. But after she married John Loder, James took his surname. Their relationship started falling apart when he was around 12 years old. After disciplinary issues at boarding school, he moved in with another family. From that point on, they barely spoke for nearly 5 decades. When Hedy's will was revealed, James challenged it in court. He argued that she had not been of sound mind when she drafted it in November 1999, but the court upheld its validity. In the end, James settled for just $50,000, far less than what he had hoped to receive. The rift between Lamarr and her eldest son remains one of the most painful parts of her personal life. Anthony and Denise have stated that James was never part of our family, while James has said he always felt abandoned by his mother. The exact reasons for their estrangement remain unclear. Some believe it was simply unresolved conflict from his childhood. Others speculate it was something deeper.